It's an election year, and in Arizona, that means immigration is again a major campaign issue. Immigration and border concerns have also been a top of mind, I should say, at the state legislature, with a number of bills addressing what Republicans describe as an invasion. Joining us now is Rafael Carranza. He's the reporting on immigration stories for the Arizona Republic and azcentral.com. Does a lot of work over there. Good to have you here. Thanks for joining us. How much are border issues shaping this election?
I mean, I think it's probably one of the top issues and will continue to be one of the top issues that we'll hear about for the remainder of this election year. We know that it's very successful in terms of getting people motivated, or in this case, angry about a particular issue. So it becomes it became a very big motivating factor in 2016. It was again in 2020. So we're expecting a repeat again in 2024.
I was going to say, it seems to happen every 2 years and certainly every 4 years. Election time comes around and immigration is a big deal.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I think we've seen time and time again, a lot of the rhetoric is also kind of repeated. A lot of the claims that we see, for example, on the children of undocumented immigrants, whether they should be natural born citizens or not. These are issues that kind of come up repeatedly, and it comes up because I think in a way it does work, particularly for Republicans, in terms of energizing their voters.
You mentioned, didn't Blake Masters, that was one of the issues that he might have, I believe, reiterated after he had scrubbed it from his website. He's kind of going back and forth here. It just shows you how volatile an issue this is.
It's rapidly changing, and I think that the campaigns also have to adapt to that. At one point, Kari Lake also, that's something that she has talked about constantly and as part of her platform when it comes to immigration and border as well.
Do you think, are you seeing an increased emphasis on this as the year progresses, as election dates get closer?
Certainly, I think that we're seeing a big deal with it now. It's part of the conversation now, because I think that particularly for people on the far right, for Republicans on the far right, and as they're dealing with their primaries, it's a way to again generate enthusiasm and really come up to that. But I think once we have the general election matchups kind of set after the primaries, it will likely be another big topic of conversation as they're trying to debate what are the best ways to address or solve border and immigration issues.
At the legislature, we had 3 bills packaged as the Arizona Invasion Act, including it's just basically making it a state crime to come into the country undocumented. Talk to us about those bills, what they call for, and how much just having those bills as a message impacts elections.
Of course, and just to give you an idea, so this bill is essentially modeled after another law, essentially, that was signed in Texas. And so they passed it, and the governor signed it into law earlier this year. It's currently being held up in courts. The Supreme Court, stayed this bill, but it kind of goes to show that, what succeeds in one area is likely to be replicated elsewhere. I think back in, 2010, Arizona played that role with SB 1070. Now Arizona is kind of following Texas' lead. And so this bill essentially, as the Texas bill would do, would allow essentially the state to prosecute immigration cases and for judges to decide immigration cases, which is something that up until this point has been exclusively the domain of the federal government and not local or state authorities.
I think it also gives civil immunity, does it not, for law enforcement if they get caught up in something while enforcing this particular law?
It does. There's provisions in there that, essentially, if an officer or an agent is sued while enforcing this law, it provides kind of immunity as well as compensation if, they are kind of taken to trial or something else happens there. So it is, and again, that is also modeled after what was passed in Texas.
But again, this seems to me, I mean, if you like these ideas and if you're a Republican and you push these ideas, you got to know that the governor is not going to be very quick to sign these into law. She's more than likely going to veto them. So again, is this lawmaking or is this messaging?
I think it can be a little bit of both. I think because, it's a way for, some of these lawmakers to prove that, they are passing these laws and creating these laws based off of what they deem to be, the best interests of the state. Certainly, the essential roadblock they face is, a Democratic governor, Katie Hobbs. But that's also why you have bills like HCR 2060. This one deals with E-Verify and mandating everyone to use E-Verify, including state and local government agencies, so that if there are services that are being paid for with state funds, that to ensure that it's going to people who are in the country with documentation. And that one, because it is a resolution, does not require the governor's signature. So if that passes the legislature this session, it will head to voters in November, so they could ultimately have to say on about that issue.
Which would be very interesting. And I want to do HB 2842, because this is the one that would allow anyone to kill anyone, to shoot and kill anyone who is trespassing on their property. You got to prove you're protecting yourself or someone else, but you can do that. And this, again, is focused on a situation down in southern Arizona involving a rancher who shot and killed someone coming across the border. I mean, a law like this, a bill like this, is this being celebrated? Is it being exalted, or is it just there?
At this time, I think it's certainly just moving its way there, but it's unclear, again, that it has any viable path. Certainly in Arizona with Hobbs as governor, and as you mentioned, I think the case in point for this is the case that's happening in southern Arizona. We have jury selection on that case beginning next week, and so that trial is going to be in the news coming up, and so I think that the timing of that is also, not necessarily, they're not necessarily, not related there, but it is something that I think will be top of mind for lawmakers, but again, it's a big hurdle to clear a Democratic governor.
And as far as national politics are concerned, real quickly here, we got obviously congressional races up, down, and sideways, and you got all sorts of races around the country, and immigration seems to be a point of reference for Republicans, especially in attacking Democrats. Is this building steam nationally?
I think you can argue that it is, because it is no longer just a Republican talking point. I think that's something that Republicans have done very successfully, is owning that narrative or owning that conversation around the border, and that essentially has put Biden and his administration on defense. And so they're almost forced to catch up. And now, we're hearing reports about Biden potentially considering executive action. So, him taking initiatives on his own that could potentially restrict the situation at the border, whether for asylum or other border enforcement measures. And so that's something that, previously we would have seen perhaps in collaboration with, a deal with Republicans like the ones that they turned down. But because the pressure is there on border and immigration issues, it shows that, Democrats are also trying to own up in the situation. And while you have got Katie Hobbs as well kind of talking about this issue,
yes,
was one of the first ones she mentioned during her State of the State speech.
Last question. With all of this going on, you kind of referred to the fact that we had something, but it was voted down or wasn't allowed to get through. Do lawmakers want this issue solved, or would they rather just run on it right now and we'll work on it later?
Well, everything seems to indicate at this point that it is a major election topic, and that's by design. I think you have the presidential forerunner, Donald Trump, on the Republican side, who has signaled that this will be kind of one of his signature issues. And so because it is an election year, the likelihood of any laws passed around this, I think, is even less than it already is. So I don't anticipate that we'll see any major legislation passing this year. So in that sense, I think it's definitely working to generate enthusiasm among voters. But in terms of any actual changes on the ground, I think the chances of any bills passing would probably have to wait until after the election.
Indeed. Rafael Carranza, Arizona Republic. Great job. Good work. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Ted.